Hello, Happy New Year, and welcome to episode 3 of the KickOff, the My Betting Mates football podcast dedicated to all things A-League and English Premier League. I'm your host, Matthew Galea, and I'm excited to be joined by my permanent fixture of a guest and household football journo, Josh Parish. Welcome, Josh.
Great to be back, Matt.
Yeah, we took a week off for Christmas and New Year's, and I certainly hope all our listeners got to enjoy a bit of time off. But that week might as well have been a month. There's just been so much football played between the A-League and the Premier League. So we won't waste any time. We'll get straight into it and we'll kick off with our usual discussion on the A-League. And we'll start with Melbourne Victory's 2-0 win over Adelaide United and the bit of confusion that followed on who's actually leading the table heading into the Christmas break and New Year's. But we'll start with the game itself. Josh, what did you make of Melbourne Victory's win over Adelaide?
Yeah, they got the job done eventually, didn't they? And I thought they were pretty good value for it. I mean, 19 shots to 7. They didn't dominate possession or anything, but that kind of suits the Victory, the way they love to play on the counter-attack. And it was a little bit of quality in the end from the two most likely sources of goals in Mishash and, of course, Fornaroli, who they will sorely miss come Asian Cup time. But you know, they did enough to get the result. I thought it was a bit curious that we didn't see a lot of Nesteri Irankunda from an Adelaide perspective. I thought he came on a little bit late for my taste, and I'm not sure why Johnny Yull was substituted. I haven't heard anything on that front. I thought he was playing really well, and I guess I hope it's not an injury for his sake, but for Carl Viet's sake, I kind of hope it was an injury, because otherwise it was a completely inexplicable substitution. But a couple of things to pick up on, but overall, a pretty confident Melbourne Victory home performance, and they got it done in the last 20 minutes. Yeah,
they've really hit their stride at home. I feel like I did attend the Christmas derby, and it was, you know, I was with my mate, and we were sort of a bit upset that the two teams that couldn't score a goal at Amy Park would go on to score 10 goals between them the week after. But Victory certainly do, you know, overall have found their groove at home, and I think the performance was a confident one. I think they rode the tough periods of that game really well. Like you say, an interesting move from Viet, perhaps not to get Irankunda on a little bit earlier. Do you think maybe he's protecting him from the atmosphere, given, you know, what sort of went down there last time?
Well, he was getting booed by a section of the support when he came on, and obviously with that sending off and the Victory fans getting on his back, you can see he's sort of feeling the pressure a little bit at the moment with all the media and the fury surrounding his move to Bayern Munich. So I guess it is responsible to sort of keep him out of the spotlight a little bit. But when you don't have Irankunda in the starting lineup and you don't have Ben Halloran either, I think the side lacks a little bit of invention. And starting with Jovanovic and Ibasuki together rather than and then withdrawing them both at the same time, it's sort of like you started with too many number 9s and then you took them both off. So once you brought on more creative players to supplement at least one of them, you didn't have anyone to aim for in the box. So I just didn't really understand the substitution plan or the in-game management that Carl Viet went for in this one. I think he could have got more out of the game, even if they did ride their luck at times.
Yeah, and I guess when the goals did come, they were well taken goals. Mashasha's goal was a nice one, and Fornaroli just, you know, he has those moments where it just looks like when he really wants to score a goal, and there's just nothing that's going to stop him from doing that. You might question the intensity of defending on his goal, but he certainly took the opportunity well and created it well for himself as well. Mashash obviously isn't going anywhere. He's going to be crucial to what Victory do in Fornaroli's absence. But how do you think Victory go about replacing such an integral source of goals over the next couple of weeks?
It's going to be tough. I don't think Mashash as the 9 is the ideal scenario for anybody involved, especially not Mashash. I think he much prefers to play in the gap between the lines. My inclination would be that they'll try and sign somebody. And I think they're putting the feelers out already because you got Chris Economides on the bench, but he didn't come on until very late. And despite, the marquee wages that he's on, it's clear that Popovic doesn't really trust him to play more than a cameo role.
Yeah.
If he can get away with it. So they don't have a backup number 9. You look to their youth team and the likes of Juratovic are just not ready to make the leap, or at least not rated that highly in the eyes of the first team coaches. So then you've got to see what's on the market and see what's out there. Would be it in NPL land, could be a visa striker, it could be one of the Australian players who's potentially without a club or looking to move. And what's Apostolos Yanu up to at the moment? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a good shout. It's certainly hard to see them replacing Fornaroli exclusively from within. Definitely, if they've got the opportunity to bring someone in, they're going to have to. It's not just the goals; it's the way he comes deep, he holds up the ball for them, and for a team that really does thrive in the transition, he plays such an important role just for buying that bit of time for his fellow attackers to get a bit closer to him, and to link up with with the Mashashas, the Arzanis, and the like. I just think, everyone will just look at his goals, but what he does deeper in the field too can make such a difference, particularly for a team like Victory. So certainly going to be very interesting to see how they go about replacing him. But obviously there was a lot of discussion post-game, and it certainly felt like, from watching the game, the commentary, everyone believed that the win would keep Victory or put Victory on top for the Christmas and New Year's break. And then, of all things, a parody account on Twitter seems to find this new rule that's been invented and puts Wellington Phoenix on top, because now in the A-League, we're sorting our table by points and then number of wins as opposed to goal difference, as is the norm pretty much everywhere else in the world. You're working in the media day to day. I'm a bit removed from it, so sometimes I miss things and I just put it down to I wasn't paying attention. But did you know about this?
I don't think anyone knew about it. Apparently it was communicated to clubs at the start of the season, but none of the coaches or players have admitted to being briefed about this or remember being briefed about this. Presumably the clubs agreed to it. It's totally bizarre. And I just wonder if, someone on soccer Twitter hadn't pointed out what was written on the league's website and wasn't reflected in the tables on the league's website, I might add.
Yeah.
Because apparently no one had told the digital team, as is often the case in most businesses, I think.
Yeah.
But I wonder how long it would have taken for people to work this out. How long would it have taken before? Imagine we got to the last game of the season and a team thought they were lifting the Premier's plate, but wait, record scratch. Look at the rules on the league's website. Like, it's just as well that we've found out now halfway through the year and it hasn't been an unwelcome surprise at the back end. And of course, I went and looked through some past league tables over the past 8 or 9 seasons, and there's nothing that really consequential that would have changed if you'd sorted the table in this manner. There's, 8th swapping with 9th here and there. Yeah. But the team that should be really aggrieved is actually in the women's side of things, is Canberra United last season, because they missed out on the finals on goal difference. And if it had been sorted by wins as recently as last year, they would have made the finals, and they were one of the formed teams at that point in time. So, they could have done something in the finals as well. So I'm sure Canberra are feeling a little bit robbed. But in terms of, the A-League men's, doesn't seem like anyone knew about it, certainly not the media. And it's very odd because there are very few leagues in the world that are sorted this way. There are leagues like Serie A that go with head-to-head records or in the Champions League. But I think the only example I've been able to come up with is the Brazilian league that goes with wins. And I'm not sure that the stated reason of trying to encourage attacking football really fits, because surely goal difference encourages attacking football, scoring more goals rather than holding on to a 1-0 lead. I don't see how sorting by wins, maybe it's a worthwhile metric that no one's thought of yet. Maybe the A-League's a leader, but I don't see how it encourages attacking football as per the media release.
Yeah, I've ebbed and flowed on where I sit on this. When I took my initial shock, reaction out of it, I sort of thought maybe it's not the worst way of sorting teams, but the more I thought about it, the more I came back. If the reasoning is simply to encourage more attacking football, then goal difference, I don't think there's a better way of doing it than goal difference. If you wanted to categorize it based on if you win more games, are you therefore the better team? Then there's maybe more of a case for that if that was the reasoning given for the change. But I mean, if the reasoning that you're stating for the change is you want more attacking football, well, surely the measure of that is how many goals a team scores, right? Not because, as you've mentioned, you can win every game of the season 1-0 and you've scored 1 goal a game. So, and it's just such a weird reasoning. The fact that it's they told the makers of Football Manager about the rule change before they seem to have told anyone actually involved in the game here is just bizarre, and it's the sort of thing that you only really do see in the A-League. It's it's really incredible.
On the Football Manager thing, I will say it was probably in some dense league rules document that was sent out, and Football Manager and their researchers, because they've got a whole team that's dedicated to the rules and regulations of each competition, their researchers probably went through the fine print and discovered that before anybody else. I doubt that the A-League reached out to Sports Interactive specifically to inform them of this, but I'd say credit to Football Manager for reading the fine print on that one. But you know who is in favour of this change is Brisbane Roar after the weekend's 8-1 thrashing at the hands of Melbourne City. They're breathing a sigh of relief, thinking maybe our goal difference won't come back to bite us after all.
Very handy. Well, perhaps, they might argue it encouraged them to continue trying to play attacking football despite getting absolutely smashed. We will talk about that game. Obviously, we're splitting hairs at this point of the season between Victory and Wellington. Obviously, Wellington sit top courtesy of the rule change. But do you think that's a fair reflection of the league to this point, that Victory and Wellington are sort of leading the way?
I think so. Yeah, I think Wellington have had some great results. Victory have drawn a lot of games that they maybe should have won. But Wellington have been terrific at home. I think they've had sort of similar seasons in a way.
Yeah.
Victory have scored a few more goals, but they've also come in bunches. I don't think there's a huge amount between them, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I think both teams have a great chance of doing something special this season. They do it in slightly different ways. I feel like Wellington are probably a bit more tactically flexible. They can get the job done in a variety of ways, but Victory are good at what they do. And I think Wellington's really the only team that's effectively, well, you say it shut them down, but Victory still did get a lot of shots off in that game. They weren't particularly dangerous, but I thought Wellington's probably been the best team at nullifying them and nicking something. We'll move on to that big result between Melbourne City and Brisbane Roar. An incredible game to sort of watch, to watch one team just seem to capitulate so easily and another team to just take complete advantage of their opponents. Was this a masterclass by City or a disaster class from Roar?
I think you can't separate it from the circumstances around them losing Ross Aloisi to an assistant coaching job. Muskie's poached him and therefore done Melbourne City a favour. Who would have thought? Look, I think, nothing against Luch Traney, who's been in the game a long time, but that's a difficult situation to take over in. And clearly, whatever game plan they went in with absolutely did not work. They completely capitulated. I would say Tolgay Arslan put in one of the great individual performances in a game that I've ever seen. And he was so good that he had people asking, could this guy, when it's all said and done, be the best import to have ever played in the A-League? Which probably means the best player to have ever played in the A-League, if we're honest.
Yeah.
I don't think he will be there, but there's just too much ground to make up on the likes of Ninkovic and Barisha and Broich. But the fact that he's even being put in that conversation now suggests that we have got a special, special player on our hands. And even just little classy touches, like a little nonchalant backheel to Natel, almost immaterial in the goal. That was a beautiful shot from outside the box. But you just sit back and you go, wow, this guy chooses the right pass every single time. He's just pure class.
It's just, he's played at the highest levels, and he's played at that level, recently compared to some of the other big names or players with that sort of experience who have come to Australia. There's been a much smaller gap between when he was playing at that level and coming to the A-League. And I think it just really shows just the space he's able to find, the way he seems to just telepathically know where all his teammates are, and find them with the most incisive passes is really special to watch. And credit to City for making that. I mean, realistically, they're probably the only club that can make that deal happen and make that a reality.
They've just got the network.
Yeah.
They've got the kind of leverage and the brand power now to lure a player like that, who is still, not just in the post prime of his career, I suppose. He's come out here probably 2 or 3 years than he might once have done in the previous era, and you're just seeing just how good you have to be like a starting caliber player in a top half Serie A side.
Yeah. Jamie Maclaren, obviously the other player probably worthy of a mention with his hat trick. He's taken the Socceroos snub to heart, some might say. I think he revealed that he didn't make the squad before the squad was even announced. Is that right? So he took it pretty harshly.
He said it at the press conference. I think he took the wind out of Arnie Sales there, but he was clearly absolutely steaming about that.
Yeah.
And the best Jamie Maclaren is the Jamie Maclaren who's been slighted and thinks the world doesn't believe in him and needs to prove something. That's the most dangerous Jamie Maclaren you can have. So City will be absolutely rubbing their hands with glee, knowing that their crosstown rivals have lost their best player and leading goal scorer, and they get to keep Jamie for all of January, and he'll absolutely have a point to prove throughout that entire time. But I don't necessarily think it was the wrong decision to leave him at home for the Asian Cup, even despite seeing the performances he's putting in since then.
I tend to agree. I think the form leading up to the selection, if you were choosing between a Fornaroli and a Maclaren, that's effectively what it came down to. I think it would be hard to not choose Fornaroli on that decision. As we've mentioned on this show before, in a competition where it's a vastly different discussion to a World Cup, where you're expecting to play more without the ball than you do with it, I think Fornaroli just offers that team so much more in terms of going on to maybe win something. But yeah, obviously Maclaren will perhaps rightly feel, he did score a hat-trick in his last outing for the Socceroos as well, so perhaps rightly feel slighted, but that's the cutthroat nature of international selection, I guess.
Yeah, I guess everyone's painting it as the Maclaren versus Fornaroli selection dilemma. And I think it's sort of letting John Iredale skirt by undetected, the sort of surprise name in the squad, which very few people are talking about. And I don't know if he's even made his debut for the Socceroos. I don't think he's even made an appearance, but he is scoring in the Zwei Bundesliga, the second league in Germany, which is a league that Maclaren was chewed up and spat out of a number of years ago when he was playing for Darmstadt before he returned to the A-League in such spectacular fashion. So I suppose, two of our better Socceroos playing in that competition in Metcalfe and Irvine, you hope that translates. But I still think that's the more surprising selection than Bruno is, to be honest.
Yeah. No, that's a fair point. We just quickly, before we get into the predictions, we'll quickly touch on Brisbane Roar's new coach, Ben Cahn, a name that's familiar to a lot of people down here in Melbourne, and obviously in Brisbane as well, with his stint in the NPL up there with Olympic FC before coming down to Melbourne with the Melbourne Knights. He's a coach whose teams you watched quite a bit of last year in your duties as an NPL Vic commentator. How do you see him faring in the A-League? I feel like he's been linked with every A-League job for as long as I can remember. Great to see him get his opportunity. What are you expecting from him?
I'm firstly expecting that he's going to be great value in a press conference, very kind of warm and personable guy, great guy to deal with. So just on a personal level, I'm absolutely stoked for him. He plays football the right way, he would say, and I think a lot of people would agree with him. When you look at, even just statistically, you look at the Optipacks that we get as NPL commentators for the league, and instantly, as soon as he took over at Melbourne Knights, and they were not a ball-dominant team, and they've almost never been a ball-dominant team in the NPL era, they suddenly went to, by far and away, top of the charts in passes per game. Even beyond the likes of, Avondale or even Rick Marchioli's Bentley, another team that really want to possess the ball. Like any possession-focused coach or attacking coach you can think of, Cahn was blowing them away. So they do like to just set the tempo, and he loves a creative midfielder in the 6 to start things off. And I think he'll have that in Jay O'Shea, who's going to be his metronome. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they work together. Cahn's been plugging away for a long time, and he's had experience in A-League systems while not being an A-League head coach. I guess the one knock on him you'd say is that his Olympic sides in Queensland never quite got the job done in the grand final. They lost multiple grand finals, so much so that it became kind of a famous thing that they could never get over the top of Lions FC. And, that's probably the knock against him. But, if Brisbane Roar's biggest problem is losing grand finals, I think they're doing better. They're going to be doing pretty well. And, Tony Popovich has never won an A-League grand final either, and he's one of the most successful coaches in the comp. So I don't think that's a reason to overlook him. I'm so glad he's got the job, and I think it's the right move for Brisbane to install somebody. They just can't let, an 8-1 thrashing just go by the by. That would have been, especially not with the new management in charge at the Roar. They had to do something. So it's going to be a tough job, but if anyone's up to it, I think it is Ben Cahn, who trusts young players, who plays possession football, and I think you're going to see green shoots sooner rather than later.
Yeah, they were a team that started the season relatively well under Ross Aloisi. There was a lot of excitement about the way that they were playing. So if Ben Cahn can reinstill that confidence, then there's every reason. I mean, he was already at the club anyway in a youth sort of role, so he'll have a really good overview of the stocks that they have from a youth point of view, and obviously what the first team is doing as well. Perhaps the long-term plan was for him to take that role on whenever Ross was done. It just came a bit quicker than many expected.
Yeah, I think probably the timeline was accelerated, but I think he's ready, to be honest. And you think of the profile of player that the Roar have, and they've got a lot of relatively young, technically accomplished midfielders. So like your Taras Gamulka or a Joe Coletti or even Florent Berenguer is a more experienced option. Players like that who are very comfortable with the ball at their feet and just need a system and a direction in order to make that passing mean something and be incisive. And I think Kahn's a perfect coach for a lot of those guys. So yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do. And even working with a fellow NPL Vic alum in Jonas Markovski, who he knows how dangerous he is after watching him at Altona Magic. So that could be a blooming relationship as well.
Yeah, plenty to be optimistic there for Brisbane Roar fans. We'll fly through the predictions because we've spent a lot of time on the A-League as usual. So we've got Adelaide United v Wellington Phoenix. Where are you tipping this one?
Yeah, it's tough because it's at Hindmarsh. Yeah. So by the time you listen to this may already have happened. We know we're going to get this out before the game, but whether you listen to it quickly enough is up to you, I suppose. So you may have already know this result, but I'm actually going to go for a draw in this one. Yep.
We don't really tip too many draws, do we? It's probably a wise one. I've gone Wellington because every time I think I want to tip Adelaide, they let me down. So I'm not giving them the chance to let me down this time. I'll go for Wellington. MacArthur v Newcastle Jets.
I'm going to lean MacArthur in this one. Jets got to win over Western United, but everyone's beating Western United at the moment, and they'll be without Apostolos Stamatoulopoulos, who was red carded. So I think MacArthur are the team to beat.
Yep, MacArthur for me as well. Western Sydney Wanderers v Central Coast Mariners, another tight one. I went Central Coast. Which way are you going?
I'm going to go with the Wanderers. I just think that they'll be able to clamp down on Central Coast. You can sort of get away from teams if you don't control their transition play, and the games can become very end-to-end, but Marco Rudan likes to control games, and he's going to have a plan to stop that. I think this one actually might be a bit of a tough watch unless there's an early red card or something that opens it up.
Yep. I just think Central Coast, their scoring format, but is incredible. But yeah, Western Sydney Wanderers definitely have a clamp down job in them, so could be the team to get the job done. Brisbane Roar v Sydney FC. Does Ben Cahn get the dream start?
I think he might get a new manager bounce, but I don't know that it'll be enough. I'm going with Sydney FC.
Yeah, I went Sydney FC there as well. Perth Glory v Melbourne Victory. Victory's first outing without Fornaroli. Can they get the job done in Perth? Perth's games have been exciting, but they can't seem to get the win.
I'm going to go a score draw in this one. I think it might be a dramatic, late Perth equaliser. I think a 2-2 sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm just because I've never ever tipped for the surprise result. I think if there's the perfect storm for Perth to maybe get a result here, it's this one. So I'm going for a Perth win. Western United v Melbourne City. Is there any other way to tip this than a Melbourne City win?
I think you could tip City by 2 goals or City by 3 goals. I think this one could be a cricket score.
And then we also have a bonus game this week with Adelaide taking on Macarthur on Monday night. How are you tipping that one, Josh?
Yeah, Macarthur on a Monday. Usually it's in Campbelltown. This time it's at Hindmarsh, but I have to go with the alliteration for this one, Macarthur to win.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a draw in that one. So we'll move into the Premier League discussion now. A full-on festive period. There's just been so much football. It's hard to know where to start, but we'll start with the most recent weekend. And I think the team that's probably disappointed the most during this festive period, which for me at least was Arsenal. And I say that as a United fan. But Arsenal, I just feel like they get off so lightly when it comes to letting these Premier League challenges slip the way that they do. Mikel Arteta seems to live a bit of a blessed existence in the media. It doesn't seem to be anything he can do to invite a bit of proper scrutiny on what he's doing there. They've really let it slip this festive period. Losses to West Ham and Fulham, and I think he himself, was pretty harsh on the Arsenal performance against Fulham. What have you made of them over this festive period, and have they really sort of blown their chances of doing something this season?
It's sort of vintage Arsenal, isn't it? This is almost Wenger kind of era Arsenal where, the weather gets a bit cold. They play a couple of opponents who like to smash and grab on the break, especially West Ham, who love to turn up and spoil everybody's day. And suddenly the title challenge goes by the wayside. It's concerning stuff for sure. I guess you could say the slide started with a draw away to Anfield where they didn't play particularly well, but that was a bit of a nothing game. They scored in the 3rd minute and then didn't really create anything significant after that. I just think West Ham can knock the stuffing out of you when they have 6 shots to your 30 and score twice from their 3 shots on target. You've been moised.
Yeah.
And I think it was David Moyes' first win away to if you think of the traditional big 4 before the era we're in now, so like United, Liverpool, Chelsea, Arsenal used to be the top 4 every year in some order or another. David Moyes, I don't think he's ever won away to the traditional big 4 in his entire tenure since United, maybe even at Everton. There's some crazy record that he finally put an end to. So monkey off Moyes' back. But yeah, it's hard to know what to put it down to. There have been some pretty inconsistent lineups. I certainly don't think starting Eddie Nketiah is a way to win the title. I just don't think he's up to scratch, unfortunately. But they have had to rotate the squad quite a bit, and they've had a few injury absentees, but it just hasn't been good enough.
Yeah, I just feel like they get off easy. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's almost like this perception that they're not really title contenders. So, if they have a good run, it's good on them.
They've spent so much money, though.
Yeah.
If you look at the expenditure, he spent 130 million at least on just 2 goalkeepers in the last couple of seasons.
No, that's correct. And if I compare the reaction to Arsenal losing to West Ham compared to United losing to the same team, albeit, away from home as opposed to at home, it's chalk and cheese. It's like one manager should be crucified and never set foot at Old Trafford again. And, with Arsenal, it's just like, oh, these things happen, I just find the reaction to another title race sort of gone by the wayside for Arsenal incredible. And it genuinely makes you question, is Arteta really the answer to Arsenal, winning a Premier League again?
Yeah, especially with City faltering. You just felt like this was their opportunity. But now City are ahead of them in the table on goal difference and have a game in hand. So
yeah,
it's quite shocking, really. I think Arteta has the veneer of a sort of modern progressive coach who's building to something. But I think they built to something last year, and then you saw the real Arsenal when they got done by City, and I just think they hit a ceiling, to be honest.
Hit a ceiling. Oh, even I'd argue they've maybe gone a little bit backwards. On the evidence.
Yeah, I think they hit the ceiling last year. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So interesting one to watch, and certainly contrasted by the fortunes of Liverpool over the festive break. Obviously, you mentioned they did draw with Arsenal, and again, a bit like that game against Man United a few weeks ago, a game they'll probably be kicking themselves that they didn't win. But I have to say, I do think they've built a solid sort of foundation for a real title challenge this year, which is a massive improvement on where they were at last year. How do you think they're looking heading into the back end of the season?
Well, if the game against Newcastle is anything to go by, they're the best team the Premier League has ever seen. I mean, that was the highest XG total that's ever been measured in the Premier League era. It was 7 point something. It's if you never kind of kept track of what XG looks like, seeing a 7 in front of that number, that is absolutely mind-boggling. That is crazy. That was one of the most one-sided games I've ever seen, and it wasn't reflected in the score at all. 4-2. Eddie Howe has got to be thanking his lucky stars that Liverpool could only score tap-ins. 7.11. Just absolutely crazy. They just absolutely toasted Newcastle. If their finishing had been better, it could have been 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
That's the only knock on them, that they need to create 15 chances to score one. It's what cost them against United.
It's the Darwin Núñez tax, unfortunately.
Yeah. Certainly looks that way. But, that they'll certainly look at those points they dropped and think, we could have been 8, 9 points ahead of City at this stage of the season. I still think 5 points, even with a game in hand, is as good a foundation as they probably could have hoped for at the start of the year. But if they can keep playing the way they're playing, and if they can just be that little bit more clinical, and obviously win the crucial game against Manchester City later in the year, they could really be on to pip City to the Premier League.
Let's not forget they're losing Salah for African Cup of Nations, so that is as big a loss as any African player in the Premier League, or even Asian player. Like you look at Son at Tottenham, there's a huge loss, but Salah is in unbelievable form. Yes, he did miss penalty recently, but look, he's just a top player, and the passes he was playing with the outside of his boot and everything. To think that he was linked with a move to Saudi Arabia in the off season, and it looked in danger that he might actually go. What a tragedy that would be if we were robbed of this version of Mo Salah in the Premier League. He's just incredible. Yeah,
definitely a massive loss for Liverpool. So it will be very interesting to see how they cope without him in the coming rounds. Aston Villa, obviously, we're probably being a bit disrespectful not talking about them in the title race. They're still hanging in there at second. Can they keep this up? Do you think, or is it going to fall off?
Well, I mean, they did go down to Manchester United, which is never a good sign, especially after having a 2-0 lead during the festive period. But Rasmus Højlund finally getting on the score sheet, doing a Federico Marqueda by scoring his first goal in a 3-2 win over Villa. But yeah, they've been doing it tough. They've been doing it the hard way, right? 3-2 over Burnley after, having equalisers go in against them twice, and then that almost last-minute penalty that goes in not once but twice off the crossbar, sort of Zidane World Cup final style. They haven't won a game by more than a goal in how long? Since mid-November against Fulham. All their wins have come by a solitary goal, but they keep winning. And that belief is something. You think about Leicester City's title-winning campaign. This is the last, improbable, even more improbable than this. And they kept winning. In the second half of the season, they just kept winning by a goal. And that belief builds something in you. So if they can get on this run again and start the momentum again after the heartbreak of going down to United, I wouldn't count them out necessarily.
Yeah, it's definitely got, City have shown that they can drop points quite consistently this year. Liverpool aren't as clinical as they probably should be, and they're losing their best attacking outlet as it is. So it's not totally impossible, but I think it's one of those things they'll, as well as needing to keep up their own form, they're really relying on the other big guns, slipping up a bit as well. So we'll do something a little bit different with our tips this week. The Premier League is taking a break for the weekend, and instead all the teams will be playing in the FA Cup, and a few interesting ties involving Premier League teams. So we'll focus on those instead this week. We've spoken extensively about Arsenal and Liverpool in this week's pod, and they happen to be playing each other in the Cup. Josh, what do you expect to see from that game? These cup ties between front runners in the Premier League are always a bit interesting. No one wants to give up the momentum in the league, I guess. Arsenal really need to build some and prove that they can beat these sort of teams. How are you seeing this one going?
Well, this is so tough because you just don't know who they're going to rest. I would lean towards Arsenal just because I think Liverpool will rest more players, because Jurgen Klopp has usually in the early rounds of the Cups played full youth teams, but they could do it both ways. I remember some memorable ties. I think there was a 5-5 game. Maybe it was Arsenal-Liverpool a few years back, and it was just all B teams, and they went to penalties. It was crazy. So I think it could be a similar affair, but I'm going for Arsenal just because I think they'll rest fewer players.
It's definitely a case of Arteta needs a trophy this year.
Yeah.
And this, if they can overcome Liverpool, this could be his best shot at one. So I'll tip Arsenal on the desperation factor, and Liverpool, knowing they've got a chance at the Premier League, might take this opportunity to rest a few key players. We'll have a look at Tottenham v Burnley, another all Premier League tie involving our own Ange. We haven't spoken about much this week, so I've got to get him in. Can Tottenham get it done there?
Yeah, so they're losing Papmata Sarr to African Cup of Nations, who scored for them over the weekend. But they're looking to welcome back Mickey van der Ven, their brilliant Dutch defender, left-footed centre-half, who went down, it seems like 8 or 9 weeks ago now with that terrible hamstring injury. And if he can come back in the starting lineup, I mean, what a player to get back. And the exact position that they need in central defence. He's so crucial. Him and James Maddison, I thought, were the two players that were most important to their early season form. If they can get Maddison back as well, Tottenham cooking again. So I'm going to go Spurs in this one, and hopefully it's a nice return for the Lily Whites for Van der Ven.
Yeah, I'll go Tottenham as well. And how good would it be to see Ange coach that team to an FA Cup final? Would be amazing.
I think it'll mean more to him as well, just as someone who grew up with it as maybe the only English football game on free-to-air TV in Australia every year.
Yeah.
The FA Cup probably still holds this magic to him that maybe the magic has evaporated a bit for some of the other coaches or other teams in the league who are just used to it now.
Yeah.
But for Ange, I'm sure we'll get some awesome quote about, how much the FA Cup means to him and the mystique of it. So I think he'll play a pretty strong side.
Yeah, agree there. Sunderland v Newcastle United, a tasty game, a big derby we don't get to see too much of anymore. Newcastle are completely out of sorts. Our loss here would be horrendous for Eddie Howe. Can Sunderland overcome the gap in quality and make it happen?
I'm saying Sunderland to win. I'm going for the biggest derby win in maybe decades for Sunderland. It's been a long time since they've beaten Newcastle. It's been a long time since they've played Newcastle, and we've been really robbed of this great Northeast derby for so many years with Sunderland's sad slide into obscurity. But if you look at their brilliant season that they're having so far, and where the goals are coming from, it's Jack Clark on the left-hand side. They don't really have a striker, even if people can big up the other Bellingham brother all they like. He's not scoring consistently. It's Jack Clark on the left. That's where the goals are coming from. 12 goals in 26 games this season. I can't believe the Championship have already played 26 games. How crazy is that?
Crazy.
But Alex Pritchard on the other side is no slouch. And that's the exact position that I feel that Newcastle look really weak in at the moment, with Livramento and Dan Burn just getting absolutely, no pun intended, but burnt on those sides. So I'm going for a famous Sunderland win, and I think there might be some value there too.
Yeah, I find it hard to tip against Newcastle, but it's a bit like that Melbourne victory Perth game. It's just the perfect storm. Newcastle are completely out of sorts. Sunderland not in terrible form in their own comp. So I'm still going to tip a Newcastle win, but my heart hopes you're right, Josh. So hopefully we can talk about a Sunderland upset later. Talking of potential cup sets, Wigan Athletic host Manchester United. It's a relatively localish sort of derby. Obviously, Wigan haven't played United too many times since their stint in the Premier League came to an end, but they are not too long ago FA Cup champions. Can they get the upset against United?
Channeling the spirit of Roberto Martinez against Manchester City, another big scalp, Mancunian scalp back in the day. No, I don't think they can, to be honest. I think it's a bridge too far for a team who's sitting, 17th in League One at the moment. Look, I wouldn't put anything past this group of clowns at Old Trafford at the moment, or Carrington, but I don't think they're going to lose this one.
Yeah, even I think United at 60% should be winning this game. I don't think they'll stuff up that badly that they lose to Wigan, but stranger things have happened. Manchester City v Huddersfield Town, the other big, I guess, one of the other big Premier League teams in action. You see them cruising through here?
Yeah, I think they will cruise through this one. Pep can't stop winning the FA Cup, even if he tries really hard not to sometimes. This Huddersfield side is sitting 3 points outside the relegation zone in the Championship. I just think they have bigger things to worry about. They were beaten 4-1 by the league leaders Leicester over the weekend, and that hasn't been going well for them. So as glamorous as this tie is, I just think their focus should be elsewhere.
Yeah. And then we'll finish off looking at Chelsea taking on Preston North End. Chelsea, again, a bit like United, hot and cold this year. Their bad's been really bad. They've shown glimpses of their quality. Do they get the job done against Preston North End?
Yeah, I think Chelsea are another one of those teams that you just don't quite trust. But again, they're at home. I think that does make a big difference. Preston haven't been in great form, losing 4 of 5 over the kind of festive period, and they were down 2-0 by Sunderland on the weekend. So yeah, I think Chelsea will win this one, just because think about how deep Chelsea's squad is. Even if it's not good, it's deep. They have so many players. So even if they rest 11 players, they'll still be able to put out a Premier League quality 11 on the park, which I think will be enough to beat Preston.
Yep, can't disagree with you there. Well, that will wrap up this week's episode of the Kickoff. Don't forget to check out our weekly columns on the website. We've got the A-League Alert, which obviously looks at the A-League, and the PL Pulse, which looks at the Premier League. Thanks to Josh for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Great to be back.
Yeah, great to be back, and we'll see you all next week.